is Sarah Glassmeyer, and I'm the Director for Data Curation at Legal Tech Hub. I'm joined today by Rhys Hodkinson, and we are going to talk about Definely. So, Rhys, you are part of the founding team of Definely, but Definely has a really neat founding story. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So Definely was founded by two Freshfields lawyers, so Fergus and Namdi. Fergus and Namdi practiced in the same team at Freshfields, obviously working very late nights. But what made Fergus unique is that he is visually impaired. So at the time, Fergus was one of the few registered blind solicitors practicing in the City of London. And for Fergus, he only has his peripheral vision. What that means is that when he had to review complex contracts, which are so often the bread and butter of finance lawyers, he was having to do so with that contract on 700% Zoom. Now, for any of us who have been lawyers and have been lucky enough to have 20/20 vision, it's hard enough to review, understand, do the back and forth of complex contracts, even on 100% traditional Zoom. So the story for Definely came one late night, is often the case with lawyers, where Namdi and Fergus were talking, and Namdi said to Fergus, if you could have any solution in the world to make your life that much easier, what would it look like? And what Fergus described was the problem which he so often encountered was, in order for him to understand a single clause, a single provision in front of him, he consistently needed to navigate away from that clause to access the meaning of all of that nested or embedded information, defined terms, clause references to other contracts. And if he could simply have a solution that brought all of that information to him at the point that he needed it, it would really reduce that drag on his time that was caused by his visual impairment. So it was off the back of that conversation that Namdi set out to build a prototype that would just help Fergus. No real intention of doing anything much broader. And then when Namdi got access to the prototype, I believe he was in Cape Town, meant to tender winning at the time, he started playing around with the solution and very quickly realized, hey, this is something I could use in my day-to-day. This would make my life that much easier. And really, it's off the back of that realization that Definely was born. And we've always said, by trying to solve for those extremes, we automatically captured the middle.
Yeah, it's such a great example of how when you make tools accessible and you make them more usable, everyone benefits. It's not just people who maybe need a little extra assistance. Everyone can benefit from this great innovation in how you look at contracts or how you review contracts or create them. So how specifically are people using it? It's for any specific practice area or just generally, or tell us a little bit about that.
So without being too generic, anyone who's working in a contract that's going to be longer than 15 pages, any contract where you're dealing with defined terms, cross references to other documents, you have a very strong use case for Definely. So we are used across transactional, tax, employment, litigation teams on a regular daily basis. Anytime you're having to sit in front of a provision, figure out what it means so that you can either advise your clients or just understand the risks inherent in that document, you are going to want to have access to Definely to make that process that much easier.
Cool. One thing that we were talking about before this in our little prep for the interview, how Definely is special. So let's talk about what makes it different than everyone else and what makes it special. Why would someone want to look at Definely as opposed to some other solution?
Question. So there are two main reasons for that. So first and foremost, we are still the only company that offers our draft product within Microsoft Word. No one has replicated what Definely does within Microsoft Word. At the same time, based on feedback from users, we started as a point solution, but we have since then built out into adjacent workflows. So now within the single Definely plugin, you can use our Vault product. So that allows you to access your DMS, search for and insert precedent clauses, definitions into the document that you're working on. You can then switch to our draft product, understand how that clause fits into the broader architecture of the contract that you're working on. And then you can switch to our proofreading product. So this allows you to automatically fix all of those pesky proofreading issues that can appear in contracts that can easily be introduced as you get document fatigue working on a contract until sort of 3-4 a.m. We always say that we don't actually always compete with the companies that try to do what we do or do portions of what we do. We compete for real estate on the Microsoft Word ribbon. And with Definely, we solve for the most amount of workflows through that single plugin. And you can come in, it's that same UX, it's a single provider, it's a single support email, it's a single pricing conversation. You're not having to procure all of these different point solutions to to solve for those different work.
I love tools that work in Microsoft Word. But that's we mentioned this earlier. And I really love what you said is that pretty soon your ribbon starts to look like an airplane cockpit, that you have too many things and you have too many, because that's the thing, every time you add a plugin to Microsoft Word, it has to play well with the other ones and it bogs it down. But this solves for it's one-stop shop. You can get everything done and you don't have half your screen taken up with ribbons. So we are in 2025 now, and we can't not talk about LLMs and generative AI. And this actually plays into also like why Definely is special with the all-one shop. So can we talk a little bit about why generative AI works so well with Definely, I guess is a good way of phrasing it.
Yeah, so 100%. So I think our approach to generative AI, maybe it's been slightly different to others in the market. We didn't update our website URL to .ai overnight to drive up our valuation. But what we've been thinking long and hard about is, what are we good at? What are our strengths? And what do those strengths look like when they get supercharged with generative AI solutions? And it's not that we need generative AI for everything, right? Generative AI is still the most expensive. And sometimes you can solve those problems by using traditional software or traditional machine learning technique. However, where we are very uniquely placed is that the need for lawyers to proofread their contracts, the need for them to access their repository data and information, and they need to fine-tune a contract to match the factual matrix of whatever it is that they're working on, that's not going to go away. Because we own the platform and we own the productivity suite, we are really well placed to introduce an agentic system that can talk between those different things, right? What is going to start to happen is different software providers are going to start to put up walls to prevent agents that they don't own accessing their data, right? Because ultimately it's commoditizing their own business model. With Define, we can have an agent that you can say, go pull a particular provision for me from my document management system that deals with this type of deal, this type of jurisdiction, and this type of team. It can pull that clause. At the same time, you can say to it, when you insert that clause into my document, please update the formatting. Please make sure I'm not introducing undefined terms. And can you fix any broken cross-references automatically? The reason why we can do that is because we own the proof product, we own the draft product, we own the vault product, and we can be very clever in how these agents can ultimately emulate those workflows, because they can go and access all of those legally tuned software products that allow them to complete that. So we're going to be releasing some really big news this year around the stuff that we're doing in this space, and we think we're really well poised to offer something that's both unique and compelling to the end user.
Cool. I'm excited to see it in action. And do you want to share your screen and we can jump into a demo?
Yeah, sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off just talking through our Vault Draft and Proof products. And if you can spare me a 30-second analogy before I move into the actual demo itself. So we've always said that the way that lawyers go through a traditional contract lifecycle, or from being briefed on a matter to preparing the contract, finalizing it, and ultimately signing it, is very similar to how a sculptor would go around creating a sculpture. So you might just need to bear with me for a little bit here. But
I love a metaphor. Keep going, please. Yeah.
I'm a sculptor and I get asked or commissioned to create a specific sculpture. The first thing I'm going to need to do is source my raw material, right? Be that my bronze, my granite, my wood, or if I'm in Norway, my ice, to create a perfect sculpture. Once I have all of that source material, what I now need to do is I need to chip away at it to craft it into something that's fit for purpose. That is a beautiful statue of whatever it is I've been commissioned to create. Then once I've done that, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to smooth out the edges. I'm probably going to want to give it a nice little polish. And I'm going to want to take it to the gallery, shine some pretty lights on it so that ultimately it is the best reflection of my reputation as an artist. Now, what a lawyer goes through on any particular mandate is very simple. We, with all of our 3 products, solve for those separate workflows. So if a client comes to me and they say, we want you to work on a new transaction, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to want to create a starting point document. Right? I might grab a template contract. I might then start pulling in particular provisions from disparate sources or within my DMS system. And what I'm going to have is a pretty sort of patchwork contract full of things that don't really talk to each other. That's what our Vault product does. It really brings the power of your DMS system to you within Microsoft. However, once I've got all of that patchwork, I need to make sure that it starts to match the factual matrix of the matter that I'm working on, that the clauses talk to each other, and that it all makes sense within that broader frame. That's really where our draft product comes to the fore. Once I've done that and I'm ready to send the first draft or the second draft or the third draft or whatever it might be to the clients or up the chain to the partner, I'm going to want to make sure that none of those silly mistakes that can so often creep into contracts by virtue of document fatigue or just purely by virtue of their complexity are fixed and clean. And that's really where our proofreading tool comes in. So a user can do all of those different workflows, as I said, within Define and within one particular plugin. Cool. So I'll actually get to showing you how the product works. What you can see in front of you is a fairly standard document. You can see that I'm in Microsoft Word. Let's say I want to take myself to a particular provision, this clause 14.1. Again, going back to our sculptor scenario, I've now just started on this template agreement, and I'm going to want to insert particular provisions from my DMS system. So I come here to the Definely ribbon. I can simply hit the Scan Document button, and Definely will start scanning whatever document it is that you're working on. You're not locked out of the contract whilst the scan is taking place. In any event, as you'll see, that scan only takes a matter of seconds, so it's already complete. Now, if I have iManage or NetDocuments or SharePoint, our Vault is automatically going to be hooked up to all of that DMS, and I can start performing a few actions. So I can either highlight the particular clause, I can hit this Find Similar button. What that will do is automatically trigger our semantic search functionality to find similar clauses or provisions to the one that you're looking for. Alternatively, I might already roughly know the particular clause that I'm looking for. So I'll come here and I'll type in calculation of interest. I hit that search button, and Define is now going to pull whatever it thinks is the most relevant clause for that particular document that you're looking at. What you'll immediately see here in the top right is we flag for you whether something is a gold standard document. Nice. So this is typically set by your knowledge management team. So gold standard clauses or definitions automatically appear at the top of the search results. And we're also going to tell you this is frequently used by other people in your organization. So you get a sense of why we're surfacing some of that stuff, as well as how other people in your firm are thinking about that same provision. What you can then do is simply just hit the Insert Clause button, and we're going to pull that particular clause from the source document into the destination document. Again, something that we do that's unique to us, and this is because we also have that draft and proof functionality, is we automatically going to identify for you to say, hey, you might actually be introducing potential undefined terms into the document that you're working on. What these are terms that are actually defined in that source document, but which are not defined in the destination document. And what we're going to allow you to do is actually automatically insert the definition into the correct alphabetical order into your document, as well as inserting that particular clause. I hit the Insert Clause button, and that particular clause is now added into the document that I'm working. The other big use case with respect to precedent search tools and our Vault is the ability to run red lines against a particular provision in front of you versus whatever it might be sitting within your particular DMS system. So let's say, for example, I come to this clause 14.3. I'm not holding the pen on this document, so I might want to see, for example, how this particular clause differs to what would be our gold standard for that similar provision. Again, what you'll see is I highlighted the clause, click Find Similar. It's found the most similar provisions in my own document management system, and I can simply just come here, hit that Compare All button, and Define is automatically going to run a red line for you against what's in your DMS and what's in front of you. Perfect. That was a very quick tour of our Vault product. Again, going back to the analogy, this is really at that point in my workflow where I'm trying to pull together all of that source information or precedent information from my DMS system, be it clauses, definitions, or entire documents. Now, once I manage to pull all of that disparate information together, I now need to start drafting this document. I need to start editing it, making sure that everything makes sense in light of the particular matter or factual matrix that I'm working on. And this is really where our draft product comes into it. So you can see here, I just simply select the draft product over here. And just again, to reiterate the problem that the draft is solving for, if I'm a lawyer or any reviewer of a contract and I want to read this clause 13.9, it's going to be impossible for me to just read these 7 sentences and understand what it's telling me without me having to navigate away from this provision to access the meaning of all of that nested or embedded information. So I need to understand the meaning of utilization, facility, clause 4.2, commitments, base currency amount, clause 13.9, and so on and so forth. And all of these definitions are defined with respect to other definitions. So lawyers find themselves using some form of Control F, split screen, multiple monitors, or if you're as bad as me, just simply printing out the contract and having a hard copy next.
Yeah.
With Finally, all you need to now do is simply double click on that definition or clause reference, and we'll automatically bring up the meaning of that term as it is defined in this contract, importantly, without you ever having to leave the context of the clause that you currently review. Not only that,
this is a 236-page contract. So yeah, you definitely don't want to be hopping around. This is, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I've double clicked and I've now accessed information that's 71 pages away. Not only that, but I can actually access all of that nested or embedded information. So I can see the meaning of clause 6.8. I can see the meaning of letter of credit. And what you'll see is that all of that information is neatly stacked in this breadcrumb trail in my Definely site. Not only that, but being the good lawyer that I am, I might actually see something in the definition of letter of credit that I want to amend based on my review of clause 13.9. Again, the way that I'm going to have to currently do that if I don't have Definely is try hold in my mind what clause 13.9 means, go find the definition of letter of credit, make that change, and then slowly make my way back to the provision that I'm working. With Definely, I simply just hit the amend button. We automatically bring up the split screen. So there's the definition or clause reference I want to amend at the bottom half. Here's the context of the clause, the reason why I'm actually wanting to make that change at the top half. I simply make whatever amendment it is that I want. I can also do that with track changes on if I want to. I hit this remove split button, and what I've now managed to do is very quickly amend something else 30, 40 pages away with the click of a button, and you'll see how that change is automatically reflected for you. Another really popular feature of our Definely draft product is just because this problem wasn't complex enough, what we also really love to do as lawyers is to have a whole suite of transaction documents and start making them cross-refer to each other. So I'm sure everyone has seen that dreadful phrase, terms capitalized and used here but not defined, have the meaning given to them. And now I'm having to go back and forth between all of these different agreements just to figure out what on earth does a particular provision mean. So with Definely, what I'm now able to do is I can simply come here and I can link a single document, I can link 20 documents, I can link as many documents as I want, I can link subsections of documents. And what Definely is automatically going to do is we're going to map out the relationship between all of these different agreements. And so now, following our previous example, if I find myself within clause 14.1 and there's a term in clause 14.1 that is defined in a separate agreement, you'll see here that I can actually double click on it. I can see its meaning in a completely separate standalone document, and I'm able to do that without ever having to, again, leave the context of my review.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I can navigate to where it's defined in that separate document, and I'm also able to very easily navigate back to where I am.
I can't say I really love contracts and find it fascinating, but I love data and how it's cross. Like now I'm excited seeing all this data and how you're cross-referencing and how building kind of like this interweb of information across all these documents. Yeah.
And that's the thing, is all of these documents start talking to each other in ways that can actually, it's important for lawyers to understand so that they can understand the risks that they might be introducing into.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so easy to miss it, even with the old way manual reviewing. This really helps back up that review process.
Exactly. The other big one is, as much as we want to just use precedent information, we're always going to find ourselves doing a fair amount of free drafting in an agreement. And when we do that, we're also going to want to potentially introduce definitions for new terms that we are bringing into this document. So let's say I'm typing here and I want to introduce a particular sentence, and I might now realize that actually I need to introduce a definition for the SOFR loan. Now, again, the way that a lawyer might currently do this is they might just write down on a separate piece of paper, this is an undefined term I need to visit later on, or they might wait till they get to the end of the contract lifecycle, run a proofreading report through all of their terms, and then try to define them. But again, they've completely lost the context in which they were trying to actually give it that term a meaning at the point that they added it. With Definely, I can simply highlight that term. I come here, I hit this define term button, and what it's going to do is going to bring up this insert definition window. So what that'll do is it'll give you your keyword, it'll show you your definition section, so we'll automatically insert it into the correct section. It'll put it in the correct alphabetical order. And what it's also going to do is going to match the formatting to the document that you're currently working on. Not only that, but if you actually also have access to our Vault product, I can also say, I'm pretty sure I've defined this term previously in previous documents. And you can just hit the search definitions button. We'll say, yes, in a previous document, you actually have used the definition for this term. I can actually just simply select that definition and I can just insert it directly into the document they're not working. So again, it's really talking to the interoperability between all of these.
That is really cool. I'm sure it was so incredibly difficult to make, but it's also one of those things like after people start using it, it's like with some of these, like, how did I drive without my cell phone telling me where to go direction wise? Like, how did we do it the old way? This is how did we shepherdize and print before? And it's going to be, I think, like, how did we ever do any of this contractual or transactional and not have a product like this?
I think the thing we always say is that most of the tools that lawyers use to solve for some of these problems, Control F, printing out the contract, the split screen, they were launched with the first version of Microsoft Word in 1995. So we just find ourselves 30 years later still having to use those tools to deal with increasing complexity in contracts. So it's really just about bringing your experience with Microsoft Word to 2025, basically. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run through 2 reports very quickly in our draft product, and then I'll just spend 1 or 2 minutes at the end talking through proofreading, which is very necessary, but sometimes really boring to have to go through. But first and foremost, our definition report. So what this allows you to do is to access every defined term in your contract. So I can see what a definition means, but importantly, I can actually see where it's used in my contract, as well as how it's been used in each of those underlying provisions. I can also access all of those pesky undefined terms. So these are terms, for example, that I've used but not yet used in the document, but not yet defined. And there are a few actions that I can now take with respect to these. So first and foremost, I can insert a definition for them using the insert definition feature I spoke about earlier. But something which is also really crucial and which is unique to us is I can actually choose to hide these terms. So sometimes there might be widely accepted industry standard terms which I don't need to define, but every single time I run my proofreading report, they keep showing up as false positives. So I can come here, I can actually choose to hide this term across all documents, and the next time I run this report, it's not going to show up in that list. So this list gets smarter and smarter the more that the users actually use it. And then lastly are the unused terms. So these are terms which I've defined, but because I started with the template contract, they're actually no longer used in the body of the document, and I can actually just simply go ahead and delete them from where I am in this report. Very quickly, switching documents just to walk through our reference report. So this reference report sits next to our definition report, and this operates as an interactive table of contents. So if I want to quickly have a look of, I agree to any indemnity provisions in this contract, I can search for indemnity, very quickly bring up those particular clauses. But really where this reference report comes into its own is with respect to the export features. So let's say, for example, I'm going into a particular conversation with a client and we just want to discuss clauses 6 and clauses 7. What I don't want to do is have this whole contract open just to discuss 2 particular provisions. I can simply come here, I can just hit export references. And what Define is automatically going to do is carry those clauses across to a standalone document. We'll maintain the formatting of the document that you're currently working on, so the numbering and whatever it might be. But importantly, what we're also going to do, automatically carry across all of the definitions that are used with respect to the clauses that you're working on. So not only do I just get that rider, but I get all of the context that I need to actually understand what it's telling me.
Very nice.
And the popular feature is the ability to automatically create an issues list. So let's say I receive a red line from the opposing counsel. I want to send the changes to the client to get their comments on it. Lawyers or associates are sometimes spending days creating issues lists detailing all of the changes in a document. I can simply come here, I hit the extract changes button, I choose all comments and markup, and we're automatically going to create that issues list for you. So what you'll see is we'll show you where a change occurs in your document.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
What is the actual markup text that's been changed? Are there any comments that have been included in the document? And then we're going to include an ability for the law firm to provide their response. What are their views on that change? And then for the client to also provide their responses.
Very nice. Yeah.
Perfect. So that's really talking through our draft product. Again, going back to our sculptor analogy, just really helping you work more easily in a complex agreement, make sure that it's fit for what the client wants and that all of those different parts of a contract ultimately talk to each other in the way that they should.
Yeah.
Last, never least, is our proofreading tool. So our proofreading tool sits within that same Define plugin. It sits within that same UX. A common piece of feedback that we hear around proofreading tools is 1, high number of false positives, but also 2, adoption. It is a very necessary tool to have in your arsenal, but the firms really struggle to get adoption. And where we see our ability to drive adoption being so much stronger than other proofreading tools in the market is how sticky tools like our draft and bulk product are. Once users are already working within this ecosystem, within this draft product, it's very easy for them just to switch across to proof. It's not having to switch to an entire different system mix.
Yeah.
Our proofreading tool picks up all of the proofreading issues that a proofreading tool is meant to pick up and then some. For everyone's benefit, I'm not going to walk through every single proofreading issue line item by line item, but I'm just going to signpost a little bit about how it works. So first of all, I can see all of my definition issues, right? So we resurface your undefined and unused terms, but things that are not with the correct formatting, definitions out of the correct alphabetical order, but we also do a few unique things. So listed and inline definitions is one that I really like because this was a very big bugbear when I was a lawyer. But very often in a contract, there will be a rule that for every listed definition, for every inline definition, there needs to be an associated listed definition that cross-refers to where it's defined in my document. So what this does is this identifies for you an inline definition that doesn't have an associated listed definition. And then by leveraging our draft product, we actually allow you to automatically insert a definition that cross-refers to where it's defined in your document and automatically inserts the cross-referencing hyperlink for you.
Oh, wow.
We also pick up all of your cross-referencing issues. This is the number one thing people want to use a proofreading tool for. So any cross-references where I actually haven't hyperlinked to the particular clause. Again, what we do here is if you hit this fix button, we bring up the split screen. So I can actually see the context of that clause, the substantive meaning of it. Is this a clause that I'm meant to be referring to? And then by simply coming here and hitting the insert button, you automatically insert that hyperlink from where you are within the proofreading. I'm going to stop there. There's about another 70 to 80 proofreading features, but hopefully that's to give everyone a real understanding for this workflow and what Definitely does. So thank you very much. And I appreciate you taking some time to let me share my screen and work through the product.
No, thank you so much. I really enjoyed learning about it. So I think with that, we are going to wrap up. So thank you so much for joining us. Again, my name is Sarah Glassmer. I am the Director of Data Curation at Legal Tech Hub, and we've just been learning more about the Finally, and check back for other product briefings in the future. Thank you so much.